What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. This is episode number 75. 2023 is out the door. We're welcoming in 2024. You know what that means? Another full year of anime and another full year of the GAP podcast. I am your co-host, welcoming all of you into the new year, Jason. And sitting across from me is my ever so loving co-host, also, I'm guessing, welcoming everyone into the new year, Will.
Yeah. Officially, Happy New Year to everyone. We already did wish everyone a Happy New Year, but that was back in 2023. So we weren't in the new year yet. Now we are. That does mean, of course, that we're still continuing the show. We still have plenty of content once to roll out, and we're actually bringing back a couple of old things we wanted to expand further on, and we're going to be going over one of our tried and true, well-tested, and does not fail at all anime closet cleanups. Yes, we are on the 6th closet cleanup this time round. And there has been a slight change to it, as we mentioned in one of our previous episodes. So rather than going over, a lot occurs, which means that we were watching we were watching 3 to 5 things at any given moment. This time round, we're shortening things to basically a maximum of 2 properties, whether it be movies, whether it be ONAs, regular series, whatever it may be. So should we just give a quick brush up for the listeners in terms of what we've been watching?
You mean for our cleanup, right?
Yeah. So on my side, I've been watching Akira, the movie, along with Kokoro Connect. And then on Jason's side, if you want to take it away.
I am watching 86, but I am only mentioning part 1. And I'm talking about, for my second one, Sankarea, Undying Love.
Do you manage to finish both of them?
Yeah.
Yep. I pretty much finished both. I'm almost done with Kokoro Connect, but I feel like I am more than knowledgeable enough to be able to go over the series in general and my overall feelings of it. So far, positive things to say. But we'll go into them in more detail right when we get started with the actual discussion. So who should go first?
I actually don't know. I was going to ask you that same question.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Okay. Oh, do we do it on shoot or do we do it on scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors on shoot.
Okay.
Yeah. Rock, paper, scissors,
shoot. That was a thumbs
up.
No.
You win. Okay.
Okay. No.
So you get to pick then. Who goes first?
Since I flubbed up the thumbs up instead of doing a fist, I guess I'll go first then.
Can you imagine just doing rock paper scissors and just someone throws out
a gun?
Yeah. That's
the classic one.
Yeah, but it wins everything. Then I've done that before where it's I bring a bazooka then. And I bring a fighter jet.
I remember a long time ago there was this infographic of 20 different.
Yeah, people went a little bit haywire with that shit. So yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to kick things off then?
Yeah. Let's talk about now. So I don't know why sometimes things kind of align together, but I feel like these 2 picks, 86 and Sankarea, it's very apt that they both come in at the same time during this closet cleanup. So
I'm okay. Now I'm really curious because I know everything about 86. Well, at least in terms of anime form, I know everything about 86, but I know nothing at all about Sankarea. So what brings the 2 together? What kind of connections are you trying to?
More like that they are polar opposites in a lot of ways.
Okay, right.
Also, how I feel about them. So let's start with Sankarea because I think that would be the one that I think I am more comfortable in terms of the genre.
Okay.
Undying Love, also known as Sankarea: Undying Love, based on the completed manga series of the same name by Hattori Mitsuru, who did the story and the art. 11 volumes, 59 chapters, and is published in English by Kodansha. Originally published in spring 2012. Produced by what? Studio Dean?
Yeah, classic studio.
And they also released 2 OVAs, total of 3 episodes that were also released in late 2012. But it's basically episodes 13, 14, and episode 0, but I didn't watch them. I only watched the main, season 1. Has a current mouse score of 7.28, and the manga has 7.66. So more or less kind of in the same ballpark. And the story, It's kind of crazy, but it's very simple. It's about a guy, Chihiro, who lives in a temple because his father's a monk and whatnot. They kind of lay this out like minute 1, episode 1. Also, Chihiro really loves zombies, like really loves zombies. If you talk to him about Dawn of the Dead, he'll probably be like a Rob Zombie fan, that kind of George Romero, that kind of thing. So,
I mean, I'm a George Romero and Rob Zombie fan.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Do you
but not in the sense that like I'm deeply infatuated with zombies though. It seems like this kid's a bit more on that end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, we all like High School of the Dead, but this guy Chihiro is like no.
He is the high school.
He is the high school, and he loves the dead. How much so? One of his dreams, I guess, is I want to date a zombie. And long story short, there is a confluence of events, and Chihiro manages to meet a girl who is basically his polar opposite, Ria Sanka. If you flip it, Sankarea. But she is from a very privileged society, very, that typical, goes to an all-girls school, very noble and rich and everything. But there is this, it's not all happy-go-lucky.
There's a dark underbelly within her family.
Extremely, really fucked up thing.
Okay, go ahead.
But then basically, because it's the premise of the show, I'm just gonna say it. She ends up being a zombie, and they Chihiro and Sankarea basically kind of get together of sorts and tries to figure out what to do about the situation. And then there's a love triangle and everything.
A love triangle?
Yep, because Chihiro's old childhood friend, a very busty One-san that is only 6 months older than him, though. I also want to reiterate that there is an uncensored version by High Dive, and it is very needlessly uncensored. There's boobs, okay?
Zomboobs.
Look,
if it's uncensored, they gotta show everything, I suppose, right?
Well, they also show blood and guts, so that's pretty good, I guess. Okay.
I mean, par for the course if we're talking about a zombie series, right? Well, I mean, again, I don't know if calling it a zombie series is like the right way of defining it, right? It seems like it's just part of the parcel.
So the reason why I am very hesitant when I try to explain the premise is because if you just exclude the zombie part, even not Chihiro's fascination with zombies, the fact that there is a zombie girl of sorts, it's a very typical, almost boilerplate carbon copy premise. Then when I tried to, I heard about Sankarea for a long time.
Same here. I mean, that's why it's I think it's also on my plan to watch list.
And it was always something that I was curious about. I heard the manga, from a lot of people. So why not watch the anime? And now I had the chance. But in doing so, I've realized that, when I ask around, even within my friends that I actually know, it's so polarizing of a show. People are like, okay, well, why is there ecchi comedy and slice of life elements in this horror romance of sorts? Why it's so dumb? Why is it like this? Why is it the character development, there is none, or why is there developed in such a way that it is so flawed? So when I was going in, and even with the score in mind, right, 7.28, it's like a good show, but it's not gonna wow you, right? If you look a contrast to 86, with the source, with all the hype behind it, it was very obvious to me that the public reception for Sankarea is lesser. Does not mean it's bad from a numerical standpoint, but it is very different.
I mean, you say that though. I mean, it's still 600,000 members on my anime list. Popularity 342. So, despite the low score, it's definitely been on the eyeballs of many people.
Yeah.
So I guess then it's whether or not it is a good show, at the very least, it still had a lot of people that were at least talking about it for that period of time.
Yeah, and where have you heard of a zombie love story, even in live action series? Of course, I'm probably like there are some, but if you look within anime and manga, there's like hardly any. It's usually like, oh, we fight the undead, or we are the undead and we have feelings, rather than one person is alive and one person is dead. And usually, more often than not, it's played for laughs, or like a zombie girl is part of a harem. The reason why I kind of am giving you, like, or you will and the listeners, all this kind of build up is because when I was going in, I have no idea what is going on. I had no idea what to expect. And then I watched the first episode, and then the second, and then the third. And I was floored. I thought it was amazing. It was very eerie, very horrific, both in the mostly in the metaphorical sense. Because obviously at some point, the girl becomes a zombie. So how did that happen? It's actually not, the event that led to it was actually not that dramatic. But it was when, it was like, that typical zombie thing of like, oh, the living is actually way more fucked up of like a group of people than the undead, even though the undead would like, eat you up and turn you into a zombie.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those classic kind of like, oh, why don't we see things from the other side,
right?
And like really reflect on what is like black and white, what is good and evil, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common trope, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, it is played in like, well, I'm now a zombie. How do we sort out my decaying flesh? Because no one knows I'm a zombie except for like the main character and maybe the main character's best friend and maybe the sister of the main character, Chihiro. Also, I can't go out. So my father, and this is the part where it gets actually fucked up, and I can't really spoil it because it's a huge part of season 1. But essentially, the problem is Chihiro is extremely sheltered because his father is this rich guy that keeps tabs on her, has bodyguards everywhere. So you're like, okay, that's a typical rich girl shit. Nah, there's actually some really fucked up shit that she has to do. And she thought that was normal. And you as the viewer would watch that or hear it and you'll be like, no. That's hella fucked up. Then you see it and that's hella fucked up. And it's about like getting out of that cage in terms of the metaphorical sense. And in her eyes, Sankarea, if I die because I hate my life and I turn into a zombie, then everything is solved. But it is not what we always want it when we have it. And I've not even mentioned the rom-com thing, because once she turns into a zombie and they factor into how to hide the fact that she's a zombie or how to live as a zombie, the horror element, the suspense, the moody element completely shifts. I think from episode 3, with the exception of maybe like towards the latter end, like maybe like I think there was one episode about the girl's stepmom and then kind of the climax of the season. So I need to mention that it's done by Studio Dean and it's from 2012.
Right.
And it shows. Visually, it doesn't look bad at all. I mean, I guess it was the up-res version. It was still in 3:4 ratio. The music is I forgot the name. I think Nano, right? Who did one of the Shokugeki no Soma?
Yeah, Nano.ripe.
Who the really high-pitched voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very invoking of old school mentality, both in terms of tone, both in terms of pacing. But my God, when it turns slice of life comedy, I think you could be of two minds. And I think that's why everyone hates it. Because the good stuff that the premise seems to be built upon, the horror element, the really fucked up things that people do even when they are alive, abuse or like hatred, jealousy, all that is kind of put by the wayside. It is addressed at some point, but it's littered in with slice of life stuff. Let's go to school. let's have a beach thing and then try to figure out how to go to the beach.
Yeah. So in terms of like the genre tags that's this particular series has, comedy, horror, romance, supernatural, and there's ecchi of course, but like
Yep.
I feel like you can throw ecchi in anything and
No,
it would
but
just
this
be
time,
like whatever, right?
This time it's full on though.
Yeah, okay. But what I'm saying is that like ecchi in itself is whatever. What I'm trying to say here is that when you have horror, comedy, romance, as well as supernatural all mixed in, it seems like there's too many chefs in the kitchen.
Absolutely.
That I think that's like based on what you said so far. It's like where do you focus on like one particular element of horror without compromising on the comedy side, but at the same time there is like this underlying theme of romance throughout, right? So where's the balance? How do you fit all those things together without one being like you said, thrown by the wayside?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who love the show, and there are a lot of people that love the show, would see that as kind of rolling with the punches. A mixing of genres is very new and refreshing. And I do understand that sentiment. But for me, if the first 3 episodes was like an OVA and that was it, it would be like a 9 out of 10 easy. But on the other hand, especially because they do images of like, a field of flowers and then her head pokes out. But then I don't know. I really wanted to love Sankarea. But in the end, I think it's a very flawed thing, a very flawed show, and it could very well be the adaptation process. Maybe the manga is really good because the manga is rated way higher.
I mean, it's a top 200 in terms of popularity on my anime list.
So if anything, this show makes me want to read the manga instead. I'll check in later. Maybe I don't know when I'll get to it. The anime is fine. It's very good for what it is. It's just not great. It's not like fantastic. It's not going to blow your mind. But the first 3 episodes and maybe like the last 2 and then 1 in between was really good. And everything else, like the slice of life stuff, I'll just go watch the slice of life stuff.
Yeah, it should be noted that, with this adaptation, it ran throughout 2012, which includes the special episode and the OVAs, whilst the manga itself kept running until 2014. So it's definitely not a full adaptation. And beyond that as well, we also don't know if it is a faithful or actually complete adaptation. So like you said, there might be a few elements that have been cut out from the manga to be able to fit it into an anime form. Therefore, maybe certain things just don't get covered. It doesn't make sense to just be like, oh, like this is like the purest form of Sankarea, which is it's totally not. Right?
And the romance stuff they actually do very well. Like they actually stick that part of the landing. The how to deal with your friend / love interest being a zombie and having to deal with that, and having also to deal with, well, you got what you wanted, Chihiro, because that was your quote-unquote life dream, and it's not as rosy or idealistic as I thought it would be.
Yeah, so it sounds like there were definitely the makings of a really good cohesive story here. It's just that there's so many things boiling in the pot that it just doesn't quite come together.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be a bit mean to make this point, but we all know about the history of Studio Dean, and when it comes to doing adaptations, they're not known to be the most faithful of adapters when it comes to changing the source into
the amount of fillers in a 12-episode cur is so absurd to me.
Now, when you say fillers, like, was it abundantly clear to you that, like, hey, this is not part of the main story? What the hell's going on? Because I think, okay.
I mean, is it like a filler in a sense that it was useless? No, because they do insert some character development. But if you were to axe those episodes and cut it down to kind of like, the overarching story, or focus on Sankaria's like, parents. And that's also the other thing too that I also need to mention without mentioning spoilers. The situation that Sankarea was in is fucked up. Like beyond fucked up, honestly. Like we're talking like you need to call the cops once you hear that. Like if we heard someone, and then they tell us that story, that's a crime, bro. But then to have it not be solved until the main characters and the anime comes in the picture, you know what I mean? Like, it's so bewildering to me.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look on anime Reddit, and it seems that you're pretty on the nail when it comes to this being a rather polarizing show. Not in like a negative sense. It's just the fact that there are some people who really, really like the anime to the point where they even denounce like even bother reading the manga because for them it seems like it's very poignant. It's beautifully directed, bittersweet.
It is.
It makes a good use of like light, shadow, and
It
moodiness. Whereas like the manga, they feel like maybe it runs a bit too long. That could be a problem for anybody who wants to actually read the full like completion of Sankarea. But then there's also ones who are like, yeah, like the anime doesn't actually cover all that much of the manga. In fact, like, it seems that it barely covers the first 3 volumes, and by barely it means that it kind of just picks out certain stories to adapt, which is like completely like normal for something that Studio Dean to do.
And the slice of life thing, it's not the best comparison, but imagine you're watching, what's the second movie in Silence of the Lambs? Have you seen that movie? Right?
No. But I mean, I know enough about Silence of the Lambs. Yeah.
They trop the globe at one point, and they go, I think, to somewhere in Europe. Imagine instead of hunting Hannibal Lecter, and have this cat and mouse chase in the middle, Julianne Moore, because Foster was only in the first one. Imagine Julianne Moore being like, "Oh, I'm in Prague. I'm just gonna go shopping, and then let's go back to hunt Hannibal Lecter." Some people would see that as like, "Oh, it's like." It's a reprieve. It's a rest from the roller coaster of emotions. Or I'm learning about Prague or whatever. And some people be like, what the fuck are you doing? That's how I feel about and this is from someone who loves slice of life. I'm the slice of life guy. Maybe not that much anymore, but.
But do you feel that maybe you're coming from the angle of, I mean, again, this is like, you're free to adapt whatever I say. Whereas like from like a slice of life purist perspective, like that's the kind of thing that you look at, and when you start seeing there's like small elements of slice of life in Sankarea, but then it gets muddied with other elements that you wouldn't traditionally see in this particular genre. Do you feel like that's probably why it's like you're kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place? Like you can't really like a full slice of life because of these other elements. But if you were to like look into the series for like the horror and the supernatural, you're also missing out a lot of stuff. Like it's just one of those like mixed genre series that doesn't really know how to present itself.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. I don't think mixing genres is a bad thing. But you really need to know what you're doing.
Dude, like, there's some series we'll be talking about today that legitimately have, like, a billion different genre tags on them, too. So this is not, like, the only one. But it does sound like, despite it, having all these avenues of exploring certain elements within horror, comedy, romance, supernatural. Like, we're not even going to talk about the ecchi part because that's just straight up like if you want ecchi, you get ecchi, right?
Yeah, like that. Like everyone knows what's going on there. It's the early 2010s. I just feel like when you switch genres at a dime and it's not a smooth transition, you don't tell a cohesive story. It becomes fragmented. And I'm just one dude's opinion. Clearly, some people vibe with that, and some people do not vibe with that. For me, I wanted to give it an 8. I probably would give it a 7.
I mean, that's not a bad score still.
It is not a bad score.
But it also like kind of represents like this is legitimately like, hey, if it's your thing, give it a shot. But like, don't come in feeling like you're going to be absolutely floored by this being a phenomenal series. Like for some, it clearly is a phenomenal series. But for others, like you, I think you kind of see the cracks and you'll be like, this could have been a really good series, but it's not quite there, but still worth your time.
This is the polar opposite problem that I had with 86. If I can just spoil a little bit of how I feel about it, is I watched the first 3 episodes of Sankarea. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. Episode 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever. And then I was like, ugh, let's just. And then 86 is the opposite for me.
Oh, yeah, 86 is a slow show.
I watched the first couple episodes. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Then there was a tipping point, which I would definitely talk about. And then I was kind of sold, and we'll get into that. But Sankarea, I don't think is a bad show. It's just not an extremely good one. I think it is worth people's time because you don't get a lot of these types of stories. Just know that it kind of doesn't stick the landing, at least from my opinion.
Yeah. should be noted again, because it's not a complete adaptation. There are a couple of liberties when it comes to wrapping up the series in the anime form. So
maybe the OVAs change stuff.
Who knows?
I don't know.
But I mean, like, just looking at the scores, like, for the episode 0 as well as the OVA, right, 13 and 14, the scores are pretty consistent. They're all, like, right across the board, like 7.2. So, I think it just comes down to whether or not this thing is your thing. And I know that's, like, the kind of cop-out answer where it's like, well, you're not really saying whether you like it or not. But it's like, that's the problem, right? Like, you cannot be the one voice that represents everybody watching Sankarea or any other series.
Like, this is just my opinion. But what I can also tell you, this probably would propel me to check out the manga at some point. I can't guarantee anything.
To be fair, it's like a lot of the things you say
did its job.
The things you're saying are also, like, not overtly, like, negative either. You're just basically pointing out flaws that should be apparent to most people. And if you don't see it, then clearly it means you like the show. So keep on watching it. I don't think that, like, you're bashing it or saying it's a terrible show. I just think that it's like you're saying this is a good series, but don't expect things to be completely perfect from episode 1 till the end.
I think I'll just end on this. I really wanted to like it, and I guess that also gave it that extra negative.
Yeah, I mean, like, just looking at, like, the synopsis and just the general premise of the show, it sounds like something that at least should be able to be interesting, and it is interesting. I just think that from your perspective, it doesn't quite do enough in all facets, and it that's a big ask for it to be like the best horror, the best comedy, the best romance, the best supernatural, all in one series, especially with only 12 episodes.
I just don't think it's possible even within 12 episodes. That's just my opinion.
I mean, you also think about it too, right? 12 episodes to adapt like 3 volumes. That's a pretty tall ask. Like, that's, I mean, like,
and who knows how many, like, which volume they extracted from, right? So, yeah. I mean, yeah.
We know that Studio Dean does not usually do a very faithful adaptation of a lot of their series. This is not to nitpick, but that's just kind of how they roll with things.
But their direction and the music is I think pretty spot on for the first, like, the moody stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a good time. Just don't expect it to be like the perfect series for you if you want to do like a catch up of old series.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like a good time because some of the really fucked up stuff in there is, you know what I mean? Like, you go to Hostel.
Bro, I watched Anohana, right? And I had a good time. Even though I was bawling my eyes out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I know what you mean. All right. Enough about my undying love for Sankarea or lack thereof. Let's go to Will. Which one of these two? I actually am so curious.
Yeah, let's go off with Akira first, actually.
Yo, let's go.
So, Akira, I mean, I'm going to say the notes because why not? Even though I'm sure that loads of people already know about this. It's, one of the most popular anime movies of all time. So it's based on a completed manga of the same name by Katsuhiro Otomo, who did both the story and the art. All in all, 6 volumes, but within those volumes, 120 chapters, which is dense. The manga was published back in 1982 in Young Weekly magazine. So Otomo, who was the manga creator, also wrote and directed the movie, which then premiered in 1988. So before I was born, Jason was just a wee little lad, didn't even know what anime was, and this was distributed by Toho. So I'm not going to go into the scores just because, like, they're good. They're good scores, all right? They're also insanely high popularity as well.
And we're not going to talk about the awards because they won a shit ton, and we're not even going to talk about, like, how influential it is because we can sit here all day with a YouTube video essay length about it, honestly.
Yeah. So just like a quick sort of synopsis. This is set in Japan, but in the legitimately the first 5 seconds of the series, set 1988, and all of a sudden all of Tokyo gets wiped out, right? Leading into the events of this Third World War. I don't want to talk about it like that because there's a lot of things happening in the world right now that are a little like too close to home. Anyways, fast forward to 2019 in the movie, where now there is a new restored version of the city known as Neo Tokyo, except that it is a complete polar opposite of the way people see Tokyo nowadays, because it is like it's just ridden with violence, terrorism against like a current government, which is publicly accused of a lot of corruption. It's just it's just insane. Like you would never imagine like open fires and protests and gun violence in the streets of Tokyo or anywhere in Japan, really. But in the movie, it's very much a reality. So it follows over a group of kids known as the Capsules. They're essentially like a little like a motorbike gang led by a kid named Shotaro Kaneda. I'm gonna call him Kaneda from now on because that's just how he's addressed in the movie. It's actually kind of funny because a lot of the characters, when they say it, they shout Kaneda, and I keep thinking like, why are you saying my country? Like it sounds a lot like you're just saying the word Canada.
Yeah, I get you.
So during the events of these kids going through constant conflicts with other rival like motorbike gangs, amongst the backdrop of this political corrupted landscape, these protests, a lot of like police violence and whatnot. There's a friend within that group named Tetsuo, and he's a very pivotal character. He gets caught up in an incident, and there is, lo and behold, a supernatural esper that happens to be wandering the streets of Tokyo, Neo-Tokyo specifically, because he had just escaped confinement in a government institution. And through that encounter, Tetsuo then gets brought into a government facility and gets experimented on. These government experiments basically start analyzing his brain, and it turns out that he's got these latent, innate psychic abilities that actually, when it gets pushed to the next level, is completely world-ending, super destructive. And so the government is essentially trying to figure out how to contain and quarantine this latest psychic they've managed to uncover, and prevent him from either destroying the city, because that's how it is when you have like these crazy bioweapons. We've seen it with many series, right? One being Resident Evil, right?
Right.
If when you have this kind of power, the government's going to be like one of two minds: either destroy it or use it. The government wants to use it, so
no surprise there.
Yeah, nothing is going to go wrong, right? So I didn't even know anything about Akira before coming into this. I tried to be as like clean slate as possible. I mean, of course, I know like the reputation and the history that Akira has.
Right. It's kind of hard not to.
Everybody knows the Akira slide, even though it's technically not the Akira slide. It's a slide that happened in the movie Akira, but it was done by Shotaro Kaneda.
Yeah.
They even say it too in the wiki, where the Kaneda slides his motorcycle, and a lot of movies, a lot of music videos, comic books, cartoons have mimicked or paid homage to the slide. The most recent one in my memory is the movie Don't Look Up, I think. No, Don't Look Up. It's Nope by Jordan Peele. That was a very good movie as well. They made a great homage to that.
I think the slide is like in Bakemonogatari. It is in so many different things, even in like Simpsons or
it's in Spider-Man,
like Futurama. You could say that slide is iconic, and be like, oh no, they're not referencing Akira, but come on, guys,
yeah,
like.
So I think with the way I want to talk about Akira, whilst with Jason going over Sankarea, of course he's not going to try and go into some real like plot defining moments in case of spoilers. It's kind of like hard to not really go into spoilers with Akira, simply because it's been around for like 35 years, and most people who have already watched it or know enough about it. Again, I'm not gonna like full on just spoil the movie. I'm just saying there's gonna be certain points where I'm talking about, because in the end, right, it's hard. Like if I don't talk about those specific points, specific characters, events, there really isn't much to talk about,
right?
Other than it being, this is a really fucked up movie.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's our own discretion in terms of how vague or specific we want our spoilers to be. But guys, it's been so long, and if you've not watched it, you probably are planning on watching it, or you're like, we will try our best to avoid any really massive spoilers, or we will mention like a word that people who watched it will know, but then people who don't watch it will just be like, oh, okay, there's something about this that happens or whatever, right? So, yeah, I also have to understand that for me, I watched Akira right after I watched Ghost in the Shell, because I even have Akira on DVD.
What were you going through, man? You were like really going through.
It was in boarding school, bro.
Man, was it that terrible a time where you just needed to look at some real apocalyptic shit?
It was mid-semester break. It was winter.
First, you needed to wreck your brain with Ghost in the Shell, and then you had to and your psyche, and now you gotta wreck your eyes and your emotions and like your faith in humanity with Akira. Like,
and
damn,
then guess what I did?
what
I did Blade Runner for the trifecta. Like, I'm not even. I wasn't lying. I just like, okay, Cyberpunk.
Do you know yourself, man? what's going on? You have like an identity crisis going on. Like,
No, I had that back then.
Those 3 movies back to back would fuck up anybody. Jesus Christ,
dude! I haven't even told you like the 4th thing. I read Neuromancer at the same time.
What the hell's wrong with you, man?
No, because I was alone for like 4 days. Yeah, in like the cold New England winter.
So you really wanted to find yourself. By
and I figured out how to solve the Rubik's Cube. All that happened in 4 days.
Yeah, funny enough, there's a Rubik's Cube right there too.
Yeah, I know.
Did you buy it as completed, or did you actually start fixing it? Before I got here. I mean, why don't you? And I'm not going to challenge you to solving this whilst I talk about Akira.
Yeah. Okay, but I came from a perspective where it was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first things I've seen, and actually, I'll be honest, I vibed super much with Ghost in the Shell the first time I watched it. I didn't with Akira, but I was one of the few anime properties that I actually watched multiple times throughout my life. And each time I learn new things and I feel differently. Sometimes more positive, sometimes more negative.
Yeah, I feel like Akira, the movie specifically, is one of those where it does kind of require multiple viewings. Not to say that that's the only way to enjoy it. I mean, like I watched it one time only, all at 1x speed. Don't worry about that. And it was, I thought it was a good movie. However, I do feel that because of the way it presents itself, specifically the fact that, I mean, there's a lot of backstory to this, so I'll go into it later, but the movie is kind of messy. The plot itself is not like cohesive. It doesn't go from point A to point B very straightforward. It's overall, I have to say that whilst visually, like from an oral perspective as well, in terms of like the music, it was like a masterpiece. You could say about it having dated visuals and whatnot, but understand this came out in 1988. Of course it's going to look like that. Of course it's going to sound like that. But I think that even if you were to put it up and watch it now, right, regardless of whatever resolution you watch it at, it is a visual masterpiece for its time. And it still holds, it still holds itself pretty well in this current climate.
When I watched the movie and the second time, with the same DVD, I watched the behind the scenes footage, and at one point I think that one of the animators were like, yeah, we spent like 2 weeks trying to figure out their mouth movement, because apparently that was a thing. I didn't even realize that like they mouth what they are speaking rather than open close. I was like, shut the fuck up, guys.
You can see it too when you're watching the movie, especially like you don't really need to do a second viewing to confirm it. Once you watch it, you can see that they definitely put a lot of detail into the characters mimicking the actual words they're speaking.
Wasn't like in GAP like season 3 or something, we had a news story where like someone found a sign post in the movie Akira about like being worked to death or something. We definitely reported on that news story.
I think so. But there was also other things that were kind of like eerie with the series as well, especially like, for example,
oh dude,
I mean, that's this is not necessarily a spoiler because it's already been reported on in the news. In the movie, there is a specific thing that's happening in 2019. Tokyo is preparing for the Tokyo Olympics. Guess what happened 35 years later? It actually happened. But at the same time, there was also during that part a lot of protests of whether the Tokyo Olympics should go forward, given the current climate that the government is going through, and all these weird supernatural forces that are happening behind the scenes, leading to people being quarantined and all that. And then guess what happened in 2020? Yeah. So it actually is kind of crazy. It's one of those like the memes of the Simpsons predicted this however many years ago. No, this is probably the one which is like, wow, like it took 30 odd years for this shit to happen, and it actually fucking happened, because there's no way that the Olympic Committee would have known that they were going to pick the Tokyo Olympics back in 1988.
It's like Back to the Future.
Well, actually, back in 1982, because that's when the manga started. So,
right.
Yeah.
I do want to mention one thing, which was the name Akira, because obviously the titular character, the main character, so to speak, and obviously his best friend, his confidant, Tetsuo, is not Akira.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's kind of like it makes sense. I mean, like it, right? The main character is not called it.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
And I also think the other thing that is rather interesting, because usually when I hear Akira, I see like, oh, he is called Akira. He's the main character. He's in the red jacket. Aka is red. That's why, like, when I first watched it, I was just like, why is everyone not calling him Akira? Then the other thing I thought was really kind of crazy is when you said that the story is fragmented, right? Or it doesn't really spell things out for you. When I first watched it, I also agreed. But then when I watch it, like, repeated viewing, obviously knowing what's coming up, it kind of feels more real.
Yeah.
Because it's like, literally what happens that causes all these issues was essentially a swap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
An accident swap.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that accidental swap was really bad.
Yeah. So, yeah, it should also be noted, right, that, whilst this movie was produced and released in 1988, and the manga had been running from 1982 through to 1990, Otomo, the creator, had basically been writing the manga whilst also writing for the movie and directing it at the same time. So there were a lot of things that, whilst it was, of course, influenced from the original source. I mean, why would you not do that, right? It also then meant that, within the 2 hours of runtime the movie had, certain things were kind of not there. Certain, like, plot points from the manga were in the anime, but not done in the same way the manga had done it. It's not to say that it is, like, unfaithful, they didn't do it correctly and whatnot. No, this is just...
It's kind of hard when the creator of the manga and the writer and director of the movie is the same person, right?
Yeah, this is not like a Promised Neverland situation, right? They didn't just say, oh, go ahead and do whatever you want with my movie. No, it's actually, I'm going to do the movie, but I'm also going to continue doing the manga as well. So it should be noted that, at least from my perspective, it might be the same for you, that you should treat the manga and the anime as separate properties, right? Yes, they both hold the Akira name, but you watch the movie for the movie. You read the manga for the manga.
Yeah, I think they both do different things, even with the same kind of foundation, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, the scores for both are impressive, right? But one is clearly higher than the other. Like 8.16 for the manga, 8.68 for the 8.16 for the anime movie, 8.68 I believe for the manga. But both of them hugely popular, right? Because we get it. Some people like reading, some people like watching. Pick and choose your poison. It's not going to be like one of those, which is like the ultimate version, because both of them are completely different versions of each other. But that's not to say that the anime movie itself is bad. It also should be noted as well that I think sometime this year, maybe even next year, we're getting Shin Akira, which is going to be like I guess like a complete adaptation of the rest of the story of Akira, which I guess is going to be kind of, for me, are they going to be picking up where the movie ended and then going through with that? Or are they actually just going to be like, we'll adapt like the source itself and bring out like the complete retelling of Akira, but as faithfully as possible?
I think Shin Akira was in development hell announced like eons ago, and we have not heard anything. It's kind of like Pluto for a long time, and a lot of people don't know the status of it, and I don't know the status of it personally.
Yeah, the only thing we do know is that, Katsuhiro Otomo, the creator, is going to be the one that is directing this still. So he's going to be having full control over his own property. And the studio that's going to be working on it is Sunrise. Now, tried and true, well-tested studio, known for a lot of amazing series. But there's a lot of people that are kind of like worried about Shin Akira, and it makes sense. It's, of course, when you bring back a property that has been so like loved and like so old, right? But then you try and bring it into a current like environment. There are a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, this is just going to be ruined with a bunch of like 3D CG and whatnot. This is going to be not representative of how the original movie played out, or even like be able to tell the full story of how the manga rolled out. I feel like at this point, like those kinds of worries are fair, but also premature.
I belong in that camp, because one of the things that I think is back then in 1988, right?
Yeah, 1988.
Cyberpunk was not really fleshed out as a genre. Like, of course, in books and obviously shows like Ghost in the Shell is very much of that ilk, right? But nowadays we have like Cyberpunk 2077. You know, it is.
And we also have like
We have the new Blade Runner.
Yeah.
2047.
Yes, 2047.
And we have a lot of,
Oh, sorry, no, 2049.
Yeah, sorry. It's done by the Arrival guy. That's all I know. I can never pronounce his name as a director. But the thing is that there is so much already that is kind of new that has either progressed the genre or now more people are aware of it, that if you try to bring it back, it's kind of like who's it for? And I might eat my words. I'm just very, very hesitant when you bring out this kind of proposition to me when I have no idea what's it gonna be.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure what they're gonna do is essentially tell like the full story of Akira, which in this sense, like if you're coming in from a cyberpunk like post-apocalyptic angle, sure, I totally get that. This genre itself has been so fleshed out over the last like 2 decades that it's kind of hard to come in and be like, oh, I'm the new kid on the block. When
It'll be like 4 decades almost, right?
well, I mean, like in terms of like the genre itself exploding
yeah.
over the last
Right,
two decades, right? But but then there's also like the fans of Akira, right? Like I'm pretty sure that we've seen like a bunch of reboots and remakes over the last like year alone, and people are like, oh, I can't wait for this shit. But there's also like a pretty loud minority which is like, I don't know this is going to work. I'm very worried about what they're going to do with this property. Maybe not even loud minority. I think there's a fair amount of people that are like, I'm pretty worried about how this is going to roll out.
So, in your opinion, when the main creator of the manga, who also wrote and directed the original Akira film, is now slated to direct Shin Akira, do you think that instills faith in you? Or do you think that actually detracts faith in you?
No, I think it's the only way to do it. If you were to hand that property over to someone else, then I would be like, this is absolutely going to fail. Right? But the fact that the person who manned the ship in the first place, both the manga and the anime movie, is now also going to be doing this new adaptation, I can't do anything but place my faith in it because I have to. Right. This is the person who brought Akira to the world in the first place. He should be the one to finish the story.
The new story. Shin Akira.
Well, again, we don't know how he's going to adapt it, right? Whether it's just going to be carrying over from the movie or if he's going to be
Did they say if it was a movie or a series?
I don't know. I think so far
120 chapters is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it just says new anime adaptation. And I think with Sunrise, they're probably going to be doing it as like a cur, 2 cur. I don't know. And I honestly don't know how long this thing is going to run. This looks like it absolutely cannot be done in 1 season. Okay. Because if it is, then I'm worried.
All right. So going back to Akira. So you said that you love the production value of it, and I totally agree.
I mean, it's basically been like given like the title of the reason why we've had the second coming of anime in the first place, right? With that, with Cowboy Bebop, with Ghost in the Shell, like those movies that came out, series that came out afterwards, like Akira was the one that kind of was the mainstay in the first place to be able to bring the revival of the anime industry back then. Now, again, I don't know like the metrics for it. This just seems to be the general sentiment amongst critics and the public of that time. And
I have to
stay still.
I have to say, like, the first 15 minutes when they had that bike fight, and then he, I guess, drives back to, like, Neo Tokyo, is if you put Night Call, the song Night Call on there, that's essentially it. And it's just, those 15 minutes is so crazy to me in terms of how awesome it holds up and how good it looks.
Yeah. I think that when you watch the movie, without any sort of knowledge or pre-reading about what the manga was supposed to be like, this is a phenomenal movie.
Right.
It was really good watching from minute 1 through to the second hour. I was I was essentially just blown away by how it presented itself visually and orally.
Mm-hmm.
The plot itself is it has a lot of duct tape on it. You can tell that it was going to be a rough job trying to adapt something that had been running for 6 years at that point.
Right.
And also then choosing how you're going to shove all these major plot points into 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
There were also a lot of things that kind of weren't explained. There were a lot of things, especially with the espers. Right? They were like,
a lot.
Who the fuck are they? Why are they doing this in the first place? And it's like, I guess it would be kind of like an unfair comparison between Akira and Ghost in the Shell, because Ghost in the Shell very much follows one very specific trope, one very specific theme about the human condition. Whereas with Akira, it seems that it is a mixture of a lot of different things: political corruption, civil unrest, a government conspiracy that's happening in the background, a lot of on the ground, like, fucking fighting between different gangs and shit. It just seems that there's so many backdrops among backdrops among backdrops that it's kind of hard to really focus on one specific character, one specific story, one specific plot line.
That's interesting that you say that, because when I think about Akira, I don't think about the story. I think about moments.
That's basically it, right?
I think about the stadium.
Yeah, exactly, right? Tokyo Stadium, where we were supposed to be hosting the Tokyo Olympics, and I think they still do in real life, right?
I think I remember Tetsuo like holding his head.
Oh, that shit got memed the fuck out in the last year.
Yeah,
a lot of those popping up. Of course,
the bike slide, of course.
Tetsuo finally putting on like the red cape and whatnot, and then you seeing like that version of Tetsuo and not when Tetsuo was like shown from minute one. A lot of like specific like violent scenes that happen in the series. It is a very violent,
especially like in the stadium when something grows.
Yeah.
That really fucked me up.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not often that like when you watch like anime in general that it gets to that level of grotesque violence.
Like this is not Junji Ito like twisted horror. This is like like almost like worse in a way, because it feels so visceral. Like I feel like using the word visceral is like.
Are you familiar with like the genre Guro?
I mean, as a tag and stuff, as a theme, yeah.
Yeah, it borderline reaches that level. Not
like towards the end, absolutely, like 100%. Like not even. I'm not even debating that. Like it is gory as fuck, Guro as fuck, I guess. Goro, gory. So the story is not great. I agree. Or it feels disjointed. No, it's like they don't hand it to you on a silver platter, right?
It's really hard to see how all these different things are happening at the same time come together. It just seems that, like, when you're watching a series or reading a book, it's like, or even like, let's just say like a sitcom, right? A sitcom will have like a main plot point that goes throughout, but then there are subplots that happen in each episode, right? It's like for example, like How I Met Your Mother, as an example, right? It's going to be Ted, the main character, finding out who his wife, that's why he's explaining the story of How I Met Your Mother to his kids, right? But then within each episode, there's like other characters are going through different things.
Yeah, or they're like gags from this episode and callbacks, right?
I think that with Akira, and this is not to discredit it at all, it feels like it's just an amalgamation of multiple subplots to the point where you kind of actually don't know what the plot of Akira is anymore.
Until I read the plot synopsis, I actually did not know either. And I don't mean it in a disparaging way. It almost is like a good thing and a bad thing, because the whole point, it's like it's chaotic, so you kind of have to piece things together. And it feels very representative of the environment, because it's kind of like, imagine Cyberpunk, but like the slums of Cyberpunk.
Yeah. And I think, the main takeaway for this is that it looks and sounds amazing.
And that's the crazy thing. It still holds up, and I think it will hold up forever.
I will say, for anybody that watches, it's on Netflix, so you can watch it there. I'm not sure if the audio mixing was done purposely like that, whether in the original movie or when it was put on Netflix. I found that the music itself was actually a bit too loud. So that sometimes whenever there are people speaking, it's actually a bit more muted when you have like the loud music that happens. Which, by the way, the music is fucking good. It's
like maybe
really
it's the
damn
mixing
good.
or something.
It could also be my speakers or the way that I have the sound system set up. Who knows? But I have to say that like the soundtrack, like the music that goes throughout the movie is so good. They use it's like when they have that opening motif from Ghost in the Shell with like that choir music, and then it's like a chamber choir kind of
and then she rides the ferry.
Yeah, whereas like with Akira they use like the Indonesian drum.
Mm-hmm.
So good. It's amazing.
And to again, not to beat a dead horse, to talk about how awesome it looks, it's the type of thing that I think is done by a madman or a group of mad people. Because, for example, when they crash, you can literally see all the screws, because they talked about it in the behind the scenes of, they drawed in every single screw because they like went to see a collision.
This actually is a kind of interesting for me to ask you, because I know that whilst you are like a fanatic of like old classics, right, things that like are like like tried and true, you also have been the noted critic when it comes to looking at things that are old or from that era. Like for example, like when we're comparing, I'm
the biggest hypocrite in this area.
When we're comparing like Parasite and Parasite the Maxa, where you're like, I know Parasite the manga is going to be amazing, but
I hate the look.
Yeah,
it looks old.
So where do you stand with Akira then? In the same way where I guess you would be like, or like with Cowboy Bebop, or with like with Ghost in the Shell, right? Like, do you feel that like the aesthetic itself bothers you, or is it not a concern for you when you're watching the specific movie?
Okay. It just so happens that the examples that you named are about space, sci-fi, and cyberpunk, where I feel like it looking slightly janky, so to speak. I'm not talking about the frames of animation.
Parasite technically does also involve some space.
Oh,
alien species,
Right. Okay,
but
okay, that's true.
That's just me like stretching things out.
But it takes place in like modern Tokyo,
of course, yeah.
Right. So I think it was during my formative years, and a lot of those shows and movies, with the exception of Ghost in the Shell, I have not revisited in a long time. Like, I didn't watch Akira, for like at least like half a decade, if not longer, since. Also because I couldn't find a DVD for a Blu-ray drive, and I just remembered I have a PS4. But listen, I think Akira looks timeless because, for example, the mouth movement thing is something that I absolutely hone in on, because who in their right minds would do something like that in modern day anime? That's just fucking insane. Who in their right minds would do an explosion without using CGI, if any sort, in modern day?
Yeah, you'd have to look at this and be like, this is a masterpiece in terms of being able to create those dynamic moments without the usage of CGI. Remember, this came out actually now it came out 36 years ago, right? We're in 2024 now.
Right.
I keep thinking we're still in 2023.
But again, you're not that far off, to be fair.
But again, I think it just comes down to like not so much like how it looks dated or whatnot. I think it's just aesthetics, right? Like for example, with the Parasite thing, I don't think it's so much that it looks old. I think there are certain ways characters are drawn that may or may not resonate with people. So it's not so much that it is an old manga. I just think that visually, some people just don't like the look of how the characters are drawn.
Like, do you know like Heavy Metal, right?
Yeah,
with like
I love Heavy Metal.
With like the hairspray hairdo.
Dude, I fucking love Heavy Metal.
I love Heavy Metal, but the hairstyle always invokes a really old school feel that bothers me.
Yeah.
I don't think it is wrong in terms of the aesthetic for what heavy metal is, but it will always cement itself as it looks dated.
Yeah.
But in cyberpunk, you can kind of do whatever you want. In space, like in Space Dandy, for example, you can kind of dress however you want.
I think it's just that visual aesthetic you kind of attach with the genre, and so that's why like you look at cyberpunk, you look at post-apocalyptic, you look at sci-fi, because those things have existed for so fucking long.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
I look at Pluto, I know it's dated in terms of how old it is, but it doesn't look dated not only because it's drawn and animated very well, but because it's in a cyberpunk, so I kind of give it a pass, like a sci-fi. I don't know. I am a hypocrite in the sense of I am not consistent in this
Yeah,
one
that was,
of many.
that was a very long answer as to how you feel about the looks of Akira. But I think you kind of needed that because you have to explain.
We can talk
why.
about Akira for hours, bro.
Yeah. So we actually just reached the hour mark too.
Okay.
So yeah.
So let me ask you this: what is your score?
I would give it a 9.
Okay.
Right? It's not perfect. If it was, then of course, I think that you would need to properly adapt the story from the manga into, because I mean just reading a quick wiki of the first 2 volumes in which it's supposedly derived the source material for the movie. I think that if they had done it that way, it would have been perfect. 10 out of 10. The problem is there's too much to put into 2 hours, so you kind of understand and give them a pass. Nonetheless, I think 9 would be the right score for it, from my perspective. I know a lot of other people maybe give it less because.
Do you know what I gave it?
7?
I gave it an 8. It was a 9, and then my recent rewatch, I gave it back down to an 8.
No, that's completely fair. I think that I was hovering between an 8 and a 9. Right, because I couldn't ignore the fact that there were so many plot holes in this movie.
The first time I gave it a 10
Yeah.
because I was just wowed. I was floored. And then the second time it was a 9. And then now the third time it was an 8. Because
it's probably going to stay there, right? Until maybe you watch Shin anime and you'd be like, oh, this whole thing is garbage. I'm not touching this shit anymore.
I'll probably give Akira a 9 at that point and be like, fuck Shin Akira. It's all about Akira.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah, I think that basically summarizes how I and Jason feel about Akira. We're going to take a quick break and then go into the other 2 series, which are 86 and Kokoro Connect. So we'll get back to you right after the break.
Stay tuned.
We're back for the second half of today's episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. We're going to go straight into the second series that both Jason and I have been watching for our closet cleanup. Jason has been watching 86, and I've been watching Kokoro Connect. Jason, you ready to, throw some shit down and talk about 86 when it's your turn? I know that we need to reserve enough time to go over such a heavy anime series that is 86. So, yeah, maybe I'll go first with Kokoro Connect. What do you think?
Yeah, let's not talk. Let's 86 the discussion on 86 for now, and let's connect with our hearts with Kokoro Connect.
Yep. So Kokoro Connect is a anime series that was based off of a light novel. So the name itself, Kokoro Connect, also known as Hearts Connect. The light novel itself is completed. It's written by it's of the same name, written by Saranatsu Anda, with illustrations by Shiro Mizukana, which is a pseudonym of Yukiko Horiguchi. 11 volumes originally published by Enterbrain through Kodokawa and published in English by J Novel Club. So the anime itself premiered in summer 2012 and produced by Silverlink. Now, I'm only going to be talking about the main first season of it. I mean, when I say first season, the reason why is because there was an extra mini sequel called Michi Random that aired shortly after the first season came out. Manga score 8.07, anime score 7.74. So both of them pretty damn good. So let's go into a little bit of a synopsis. It revolves around 5 high school kids: Taichi, Iori, Himeko, Yoshifumi, and Yui are all members of a kind of ragtag put together student cultural research club that's at the high school that they go to. Meanwhile, whilst they're doing their usual student club activities, characters within this troop of students start encountering different kinds of supernatural phenomena that affect their daily lives, all that seem to be kind of done by this weird entity known as Heartseed. Their intent to use this kind of phenomena to try see how characters act and test them out. But the purpose of this social experiment, this phenomena, is never really explained. So as these phenomena continue to happen, the 5 students have to basically strengthen themselves, really, really bond together to get through these. And, inadvertently, whilst these testing times happen, they also learn more about each other, whether or not they trust each other. There's a lot of a lot of shenanigans that happens throughout the series, and I'm conflicted with Kokoro Connect.
So before we get into your thoughts, I think we need to emphasize what do we mean by supernatural phenomenon, because I think a lot of people might not have an idea of what we mean by that, because obviously
it's a pretty broad term.
Yeah,
right? We could be talking like we could be like magic. It could be aliens. It could
Right.
be like
I mean,
monsters.
alien
and whatnot.
does it does show up.
There is an alien of sorts. Again, we don't really know
Really
much about
creepy,
them.
by the way.
Right? Very, very unsettling. But essentially, like at least like again, we're taking this from the Mal synopsis as well. The first phenomenon they encounter is body switching.
Right.
So basically, what happens is one character, let's say Taichi, all of a sudden one day wakes up and he finds himself in Himeko's body, or Yoshifumi wakes up and finds out they're in Iori's body. So it's in one sense, it's like on the surface, it's body switching, but they really hone in the series that it's not body switching, it's personality switching, which. Again, I think it's one of those themes that they try and hone in to the audience, that this is one particular area we're trying to focus on. It's not so much the physical side that we're switching. It's more the emotional side, the psychological side within that is transferring between entities. And
it's also very obvious, just like how in Monogatari, there's like Baken Monogatari, Nisei, Koi Monogatari. Each, like, that's why they call it like arcs. Is like a social experiment. Like you can easily tell when one arc starts and one arc ends, and it follows a similar kind of formula, especially when the five main characters kind of know, like, all right, okay, so this is a situation now. What do we do? How do we figure it out? And blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Now, this whole body switching, personality switching thing is not necessarily new, right? It's also
Absolutely,
not the only one of its kind. I mean,
Freaky Friday.
We got Freaky Friday. We got Your Name. We also got like Sense8 as well. I heard there's a lot of good things about that series too. Relatively old. I say old. It came out like maybe like.
Doesn't it feature like a Japanese woman?
Yeah, it came out like maybe like 8-10 years ago.
Okay.
Let me just double check that. But yeah, so. I think when we're talking about, it actually came out to us, 8 years ago. So with this particular series, when I mentioned that I'm conflicted about it, let's first of all talk about the themes, right? Drama, romance, supernatural. Those are the genres, sorry, and the themes as well as school and love polygon, right? So
Think as Niver also is like a very similar anime that has kind of the same kind of philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched Kiss Niver, but you were pretty into it despite it being a rather flawed anime.
Extremely,
right?
flawed, yeah.
So that's okay.
Sorry.
Before we even talk about Kokoro Connect, though, I don't think that we need to talk much about the controversy that surrounded Kokoro Connect in the first place, because whilst it is a really fucked up thing and it should not happen in like any situation, we're talking about bullying here specifically. This is not the
like
time
IRL bullying.
Very, very well documented, well covered. Very, very fucked up. Let's just say it's fucked up.
And whether or not you agree with the resolution of it, I think it is pretty, as you said, well documented, and I think it is pretty resolved in terms of the situation.
That voice actors ended up actually getting onto some pretty big gigs. So
yeah,
good for them. And also shame on Silverlink and anybody connected in terms of this bullying scandal.
And you can Google it, and actually it's quite separated from the production itself.
Yeah, we don't want to talk much about it because one, we just don't have the time for it, right? We only have like 2 hours ish for these episodes. But at the same time, it's like I also don't want to mention these things to detract from what Kokoro Connect is as an anime. So we're just going to solely focus on the property itself in anime form and go from there. So Kokoro Connect, in terms of going through all these different social phenomena within the students, within the friend group that is the core focus of Kokoro Connect, I'm pretty torn in terms of how these social phenomena are implemented and the purpose of them. Again, it's really hard talking about these series without sort of like going over certain spoilers, simply because the fact that like I don't want to spoil people, but
Okay.
also it's kind of hard talking about the anime without spoiling people.
So I am going to mention something that is like a super, super light spoiler in that if you haven't watched the show, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But it involves a hospital.
Yep.
That is that one of possibly the many things that you are disagree with the show?
I honestly hated the hospital scene. I was not happy with it. But I'll go into that later. And I'll talk about the body switching because the fact that it is used as a synopsis for Kokoro Connect on my anime list, I think that's fair game. So in terms of the whole body switching, personality switching, what I really liked about that was not so much the whole mystique and supernatural element of the phenomena itself, but rather how the characters actually play out the phenomena, which
I love that.
You have to give props to the voice actors who did an amazing job, because not only were they able to pick up certain mannerisms, they also picked up speech patterns. They picked up ways of being able to interact with new characters, but in different bodies. Like, they did a solid job being able to reflect that. And
it was very convincing of, they're actually doing the phenomenon almost
like quite literally. They take on that character's personality whilst using their own voice. Also, special props to Aki Toyosaki, who voiced Iori Nagase, because she also played the chip tooth girl from Yuru Camp. Immediately, because like for me, like I'm not like huge in terms
Who's
of
the chip tooth girl?
What's her name? Ari. Let me just double check.
What was her role?
She was the blonde girl in Yuru Camp.
Oh, the banana girl?
Aoi Inuyama.
Oh, the banana girl. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
not chip tooth. Like it's like a little beast,
a little snaggletooth,
like a
kind of
beast
thing.
tooth kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I'm not usually like the biggest like person when it comes to like recognizing VAs, unfortunately. But her voice immediately, I was like, oh, that's her. I immediately was like, okay. And for me personally, I thought that her performance as a VA in this series was fucking phenomenal. She was really good as Iori Nagase. So I think that's like one of like the major like props I can give to Kokoro Connect, because they really do play out these phenomena like really, really well. The problem I have though is that the phenomena themselves are kind of lackluster. It's in the same way that we were talking about Sankarea, where it's like there's a lot of things going on, but they don't really come together. That's kind of how I feel with this too, because remember, I think the core focus here is the hearts connecting, right? Hence why it's a drama, romance, love polygon series with a supernatural element to it.
Right.
I felt that the supernatural element itself, if it didn't exist in the first place, it wouldn't have really changed like anything in the story for me. I felt that it was kind of just thrown in there as a plot point, and it felt a bit lazy,
like forced.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it comes off as forced is because when you're doing this series as an anime, conversations, dialogue, they're very direct. It's very rare that you get moments of characters having inner monologues or just thinking about doing things themselves. Very rare, right? And I think because of the fact that this series started off as a light novel, I think that's why, like, if I was able to read Japanese, or if there was, like, a translation of this, I'm sure there is an English version of Kokoro Connect that I could probably read, I felt it would play out better that way.
Yeah, it's like the Monogatari thing of, like, probably the original Japanese text has these nuances that through translation is just lost.
That, and also it's like when you voice out your emotions versus like when a character has an inner monologue trying to deal with like their inner thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yeah,
it doesn't play out the same way.
Right.
And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing for Kokoro Connect, because you kind of have to roll with the medium, right? You can't just have characters just doing inner monologues for every episode. That just takes way too fucking long. You know?
I mean, okay, here's another thing that I also want to emphasize that was not apparent to even me when I first watched it. The whole premise, at least with the plot synopsis, was the whole switching Freaky Friday situation. But it turns out that that's like a third of it, a quarter of it, and then new phenomenon happens. And I actually did not realize that until obviously it happens. Because I thought, 12 episodes is just going to be about all of that. And I was like, no, it was just done and dusted like episode 4.
I thought that when the episode happened, it's like, oh, I guess we're just going to see more of that phenomena, but in like different ways. That would have been awful. Basically, it's just a series of phenomena that keep happening to these students. Hence why like each arc, each story is like named after that specific incident, that specific phenomena.
Right.
So yeah, look, I think that the characters were done pretty well. I think that there were some sort of like inconsistencies in terms of the animation quality.
I agree with that.
I'm not gonna be like, oh, it was awful. I just think that there were some parts that were kind of just done a little bit lazy or just not done well,
or they were out of budget. There could be so many different things.
I think more
right?
time than anything.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, if memory recalls, Will, how many phenomenons was
three in the first curve, and then the OVA focuses
right,
on another one.
On another one,
yeah,
right?
That's why there was like 4 episodes afterwards. So basically, each phenomena roughly takes around 4 to 5 episodes to go through. So
I'm trying to remember which one was the third one.
Oh, that was the
because I have 2 out of 3. I mean, do you want to write it or like? I don't know.
What's the opposite of an adult?
Oh, okay.
There you go. Now you remember. Again, not so much spoilers. I don't think that knowing what the phenomena are is much of a spoiler because I think that it kind of takes the back seat when you're looking at these characters kind of going through their emotions, their desires, and really playing into that like romance drama, love polygon aspect. So
wait, but there's 5 of them. So how? Oh,
that's why it's called a polygon.
Polygon, right?
Yeah. So when I talk about this particular sort of like romance drama aspect, I think that love polygons are hard to do simply because the fact that there's always 1 or 2 relationships that are kind of just thrown by the wayside. It's really hard to give each relationship in this polygon equal viewing, equal importance. And that's kind of how I felt with certain characters in this in this series. I felt that yes, by default they are all the 5 main characters. It was just that some of them were a bit more main character than others. Very clear from the beginning.
Yes, I can also guarantee that there are 2, I would say, supporting main characters.
Yeah.
And 3, and it's so obvious.
One itself, I would say, is like the most support, which we're not going to name, but it just felt like this character really
the
has
best friend
to offer.
syndrome.
Yeah, they just really have nothing to offer here. I don't see much about this character that makes me like them because the other 4 characters, I can see things that like really resonate with me in terms of why I like those particular characters.
Okay.
Specifically one,
right?
Iori. I like Iori the most.
Right.
But that's because she also is voiced by a really, really talented voice actress. So
I think Iori's voice actress is the most outstanding performance, but my favorite character is obviously Yui.
Yeah, Yui was a good character. I actually liked Inaba the most. The cold silent killer one. Yeah,
right.
She was. I think because of the fact that like when you're talking about personality switching and she's like the most stoic, the most staunch in terms of protecting her personality, it really plays out well when these characters are kind of encountering these social phenomena. Not to mention,
oh whoops, I messed up. I did like Inaba.
Yeah,
sorry,
Yui's the karate girl.
Yui's the karate girl,
which I thought she was. Okay.
There is a very pivotal scene, I think, in the middle of season 1 that involves a freeze frame of 2 characters.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And there's a realization and a growth development, and it was phenomenally done, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it was really the thing that kind of set me like, oh, this thing is flawed but really special as well at the same time.
Yeah. The voice actress for Inaba was Miyuki Sarashiro. Phenomenal act as well. So
these phenomenons, right, are like like the Freaky Friday one, because it's the plot synopsis, is the first arc. It's very like overdone, overused. But do you think the way that they handled it, or
I think that's essentially it, right? Like when I'm talking about these phenomena, they are definitely not like the focus of this series. Rather, they are like the little motifs or plot points that help to push other aspects. Like they really help to prop up the romantic drama side of it. And so, and you are invested in these characters. You do want to see growth. You do want to see resolution. The problem there, though, with the resolution that I have, again, try not to spoil here.
Yeah.
I think it was really cheap how a lot of things get resolved.
I think this is the thing that involves the hospital is the second thing, right?
Which
the
was like
the second arc, right?
No, that's the first arc.
Oh, the first arc.
Yeah.
Because it culminates them going to...
Yeah. And you definitely get to see these characters get like real raw with their emotions, really trying to like go beyond who they are just on a personal level and actually opening up to others. Because I think it's like one of those things where it's like everybody has different faces, right? The way you talk to your parents is different. The way you talk to your friends, to your boss, to
your
your
vernacular,
colleagues,
right? Your gestures,
your facial expressions, right? The way or certain things that you say or don't say when you're in front of a certain person.
And don't forget, we're talking about Japan. That has this hierarchy even within the way that you talk.
Yeah.
That is so...
Face is
like rigid.
Is very important as a value, as a virtue for a lot of East Asian people. Not to say it's not the same for other people. It's just that we're from this culture.
We're just familiar with it.
Yeah, we're very familiar with it. And that's why it's like when you're watching this, there's a lot of things, despite it being a Japanese property, you can see a lot of things from our perspectives of Chinese culture where it's like, no, this is absolutely true. This is how you would talk to people if you did not want to reveal everything about oneself.
Do you think that the conflicts that were generated, because I think one of the criticisms that I've heard a lot is, well, why would they need to, these 5 characters, due to this phenomenon, had to reveal it's so melodramatic? I think that is one of the things that I hear constantly about the show.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where like a lot of criticism from me comes from, where it does come off quite lazy. It's the cheap way out,
right?
Where certain conflicts that happen between characters, the way those conflicts are resolved, it just seemed a bit too easy,
right?
It felt like we were so invested in these 2 characters, these 3 characters, these 5 characters, whatever situation's going on, and then when you get to that point where they actually do come to a resolution, you just feel a little bit
unsatisfied,
a little bit
right?
betrayed because of the fact that you have spent so much time building up your emotions and your thoughts towards these characters that when things come to an end, you're like, that was it. Oh, that felt lazy. That felt like shit. Again, though, I quite like Kokoro Connect. Right, despite its flaws, despite the controversies that surround it and the production staff. I just feel that it probably would be better to read the story as opposed to watching it. But that's not to say that the manga itself is bad. I mean,
light novel?
The anime, it's bad. I think the light novel should be the one that if you were to enjoy the full story, there is a manga. But if you were to enjoy the story, I think like the light novel would be the way to go. Manga, I suppose. Again, how much are they going to adapt from the manga for the manga? I don't know.
There's only 5 volumes.
Yeah, the anime, well, because the light novel itself isn't that long. I think it's also like 5 or 6 volumes. Not that
11.
Okay,
91 chapters.
Oh, so they basically like were,
but it's not the same as like manga volumes, right?
No. I mean, have you ever seen a light novel? They're incredibly small. They're
I've
actually
never...
very, very small. Like you actually fit a light novel in the palm of your hand.
I mean, I knew that like the reason why they call it light is not actually because of the content, is more actually because its size is portable.
It's a quick read.
It's light in that sense, right?
Yeah.
But I've never actually seen a light novel.
They're like, when I saw it for the first time when I was in Japan like 5-6 months ago, I did not realize how small a light novel is. Like they're literally like the size of your palm.
Right.
So
you can hide it.
You could put it in like your breast pocket, put it in like your pants pocket. Like you could even just hold it in your hand and nobody would know you're holding a light novel.
The melodrama, actually, I'm of the opposite camp. I feel that, well, it's kind of supernatural sci-fi to have this situation in the first place. Of course, anime is fictional, but the characters are in this situation kind of in the most extreme version of it, right? And to make matters even worse, Michi Random is...
It's the fourth phenomena that happens.
And it's very funny that you mentioned something. I have to be somewhat cryptic. But actually, also, it almost doesn't matter because the point is actually not the phenomenon to me.
Exactly,
because the phenomenon puts the characters in that situation, and it's about what they do. However, almost all, with the exception of maybe the third one, I thought, I don't know, there was like one that I thought was resolved very well, one that was resolved poorly, and one that was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Of the three. And the fourth one, the Michi Random, is fucking wild. So, just pause or like skip ahead for like, do you want to know the fourth one?
No.
Okay.
Because I actually do want to finish it.
Okay. It's in the plot synopsis if you guys do want to check it out. But it's very obvious what happens because with these phenomenons, there's always a catch. There's always an issue.
I know what the phenomena is for that one.
But again, you do?
Yeah.
Because it's funny that you alluded to it. Okay, okay.
I know what the phenomena is. I just want to see, like you said, I want to see how it gets played out.
I have to say that fourth one, really good.
Yeah. The score is reflected too. I mean, the fact that these are high sevens, it's definitely a good series. That's what I'm going to end with in terms of how I feel about Kokoro Connect because the characters, the ensemble itself, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Would like to have seen more focus on other characters. Just not to say that I find them interesting. I just feel that they deserve a little more airtime. It's one of those main character syndrome kind of things, right?
Because they're all supposed to be main characters.
It's just hard again, right?
Yeah.
With this massive polygon that like you can't share enough screen time amongst all the characters.
If I remember correctly, each of the mini arcs kind of has like a character of focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like you kind of know, right, like who are the main characters.
But too bad there's only 4 and not 5.
Yeah, that's why like you have to read the light novel or the manga, I suppose.
So what did you give it?
I gave it an 8.
I gave it an 8 as well.
I gave it an 8. I think like it's definitely a good series. I was close to giving it a 7. Halfway through because I felt that just certain things just were a little too lazy for me. But at the end of the day, I think that they really do play the romantic drama side really well.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to the reason why I gave it an 8, like the VA performances.
No, it really is.
They were amazing.
Because it's very convincing. Because you're just like, oh, you're this person. I can easily tell.
Like you basically tell this character, this voice actress or voice actor, you're going to be playing this character, but you're also going to be playing the other characters too. Oh, what do you mean? And then when you read the script and you do it, it's like, wow, they fucking killed
Imagine
it.
that table read is fucking insane. They did a drama CD, and I think that is interesting too in of itself because I would love to hear it among other drama CDs. I think this is like the one that I would sought out the most if possible.
You would seek out.
Right,
yeah.
Because sought is past tense.
Yeah.
English is not my first language, Will.
It was Chinese, right?
No, it's just gibberish. But let's listen. Okay, so that concludes, right?
Your first words were not mama or papa, it was slice of life. Ooh.
It is 8 and 6.
All right. We're now going to be transitioning into the dark and gritty and soulless series that is 86. So, Jason, take it away.
So, I'm going to talk only about part 1, which is the first 11 episodes. But 86 is based on the ongoing light novel series of the same name, written by Asato Asato.
Actually, it's pretty apt that we're both covering like light novel anime adaptations for the latter part.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
I didn't even think about that.
And illustrated by Shirabi. Originally published by ASCII Media Works, published in English by Yen Press. Part 1 premiered in 2021. And I think right at the end of it, they announced, yo, guys, don't freak out, but part 2 is coming in the fall.
Oh, yeah, they needed it, yeah.
Because, oh, God. Both are produced by Studio A1. Part 1 of the anime got an 8.29 on my anime list, and the Source Mouse score has a raw score of 8.81, ranked 33. Okay, it won a shit ton of awards, some grand prize. It's really outstanding in terms of the accolades it gets.
But that's not what we're focusing on, because we want to know what Jason thinks about 86.
I don't know if I can even talk about the plot synopsis.
It's just war. It's just straight up a terrible time. Everybody's going through some crazy territorial conflicts.
listen, if you heard things like proxy wars, if you heard things like AI, if you heard things like fascism, you kind of know what you're getting into.
I think if you say mecha, you know what you're getting into. For the most part.
I mean, I don't think the mecha part is actually crazily important. I mean, it's very integral, but it's not like.
But I think like you can't talk about all these melodramatic like war-torn shit and not be like, well, that's not mecha. No, because that's what mecha is.
More like Takikomi.
Yeah, like, I mean, look, action, drama, sci-fi as genre tags, themes, military, and mecha. Like this is not going to be a happy series.
Yeah. And then Sawano is doing the music, and the director of Promised Neverland, I forgot the name of the director, is directing 86. So,
I believe his name is Toshimasa Ishii.
Thank you. All right, let me think. How am I going to break this down, Will? I think the easiest thing I can say that I think is universally agreed is the production value. There is no question in my mind that this is an amazing, gorgeous show to look at. Of course, you could say, like, well, the 3D mechs don't look that great. And they don't look that necessarily great. But they look good enough that, like, I don't give a shit. Like, it looks fine. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't stand out in a bad way. It is very... It blends in, and it's great.
I just didn't like the way they move.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like, well, for me, like, I have a phobia of spiders, and that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, you don't live in Australia, Will.
Yeah, I'm never going there.
I told you about my Black Widow story, right?
Yep, you did.
Okay. So,
I told you about my Daddy Longleg story, right?
Yeah, and I understand why it's a big deal for you. I didn't think it was a big deal.
Dude, one of its legs was in my eye.
Look, listen. Like, I'm not, like, dismissing.
It was an awful experience, Jason.
Definitely.
I have not moved past it yet.
Yeah, I know. So.
The trauma, Jason. The trauma lives within me. But let's talk about the trauma in 86. Let's talk about overall.
The trauma in 86. Holy fuck.
Because first of all, you say production values. Makes sense when you have, like, Sawano doing the music. You got A1 Pictures, like, actually doing, like, the full anime itself. Good directors. The whole backroom staff are phenomenal for this, right? And rightly so, in terms of, like, the acclaim it has, the high scores it has both for the light novel and the anime series.
I also like the attention to detail for the OP and ED in the sense that the opening scene has a frame of animation, because let's say it's war. So there are people that perish in these wars, and that frame shows the people who have perished, and I like that touch. Also, another thing that is actually quite rare nowadays, especially with a big budget show like 86.
Oh, yeah.
A shit ton of post-credit scenes.
Yeah. This, you could tell this thing had, like, a budget that was, like, unseen for a lot of other series. Or the studio just made good use of that budget.
Or they bet all their chips on 86.
And it fucking worked.
And everyone loves it in general. And a lot of people think that it's outstanding. I think there's a season 2, and then maybe I don't remember.
There is a season 2.
Yeah.
I
Forgot about it.
Oh wait, no, okay. There was a part
2.
Yeah,
I meant season 2.
Yeah, I don't think there's any news of that yet.
I find it hard to believe that they're not thinking about that. But who knows, right?
It's been about 2 years. Well, actually, no. Yeah, it's been about 2 years, so maybe we're due to see some 86 later this year or next year.
We'll see. We'll report on it if
also
it does
just comes
happen.
down to how much they've adapted, right? They might need to give some time for the light novel to get more story out.
It's ongoing, so I'm unfamiliar, especially with light novels. Like with manga, you and I will kind of have a very easy way to translate that to, like, episodes. But with light novel, we have no idea in general.
Yeah. So currently with 12 volumes for the light novel, they might have already adapted, like, minimum of half of what is out. So if they were to continue adapting it, you would actually run out of time.
I mean, 2 curs is a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
even for manga.
Again, we don't know how fast they adapted it, but the story is dense for 86. It's a pretty rough time, like, just actually watching and understanding the trials and tribulations that all these characters go through. But that's enough about what I want to say about it. Jason.
So I want to ask you, Will, with part 1 and part 2, did you watch it back to back?
Yes.
Okay. Because obviously, if you watched it like as it was airing,
no,
you wouldn't.
actually, no. I did. I watched it as it was airing. Actually,
Okay.
yeah.
So you had that gap because everyone had to.
Yes.
Got it. But you watched it like almost like weekly.
Basically, like I would basically give it enough time to like let enough episodes to come out, watch it, and like binge the fuck out of it, finish part 1, wait for part 2 to come out, and then just binge the shit out of that too.
Got it. So that's important because there were not only due to time constraints I couldn't finish all of part 2, but also because I thought I just wanted to give you my thoughts on part 1, and I'm very certain I will at some point give you my thoughts in
Overall,
the podcast and you on part 2, which might change how I feel. Let me first talk about the first 3 episodes, because it's the opposite of how I feel about Sankarea. I thought the first 3 episodes of 86 was shit. Not shit in production value, but...
I mean, the first 5 minutes of episode 1 was phenomenal, but I agree that there were testing times when it came to watching the first part of 86.
It was production value phenomenal, like the choreography, I guess, of the battlefield and everything, perfectly fine. The issue is, and this is not necessarily 86's fault, but my comparison when I'm watching the show is just Attack on Titan fucking everywhere. This is Attack on Titan, this thing, that thing, that thing. Doesn't make it okay to have that thought because it's kind of unfair to 86. But I'm just telling you, like, when I was watching all of part 1, all I could think about was this just is like AOT, this part, that part. It also doesn't help that Sawano's fucking banger with his soundtracks.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But it's also like you have to understand too, like when it comes to like these kind of war military shows, those tropes and those kinds of themes are going to be consistent with other ones that you
Absolutely.
see. You know?
Right.
So it's not an unfair. Well, maybe a little bit unfair, but I can see why like, it irks you when you see it.
Like, at least you can see that, okay. I mean, it's kind of hard not to have those comparisons.
Like,
it's not a fair thing per se, but
it's also like you're not bashing it either, right? Like you kind of know that like this is how it's going to be done if you're going to be doing a military mecha show.
Yeah, and then it's going to be like, oh, the first 3 episodes,
I mean, we have a friend, a mutual friend there. I was like, I think Attack on Titan's a mecha.
Yeah, we should bring that guest on and talk about that because I think that's a very interesting conversation. But with 86, it was like, okay, female character, okay, the duality of proxy war and frontline, oh, the idealistic versus the pragmatic and the practical real like life situation, the shitty war and whatnot. And here's the other thing, it reminded me of like Fire Emblem, where like there is a resting period and then there's the war part, then there's the resting period, then there's the war part.
I mean, they have a beach episode in 86.
Yeah, like
I like that episode actually. It felt really out of place, but at the same time, it was kind of like you need to see that. I mean, like there were documented like stories of like the Second World War when like Germany and England were fighting.
The Christmas one, right?
They actually put their guns down, but
for Christmas.
Let's play a football match.
I think it was for Christmas.
And then they picked up their guns again and started shooting each other. So
it was all quiet, and then it wasn't. All right. So okay, but there was a tipping point for me, and I think for a fair number of people, they would have gone through the same process. They'll be like, "This is good, but not really feeling it." Then there was a rant at the post-credit scene of episode 3. Where an angry person was shouting at another person, and the person being shouted at kind of loses their mind. I'm not saying the gender, but it was pretty obvious. And that was when I was just like, oh, holy shit. Okay, all right. Then the phrase, "I don't want to die," is really... Okay, I get that phrase, but when it was said once and twice, I think, kind of really hits very different. And I think the thing with 86 is also I have not seen shows like IBO, Iron Blooded Orphans. So
Fucked up, but yeah.
So I don't know how similar in vein or thematic, at least thematic maybe, but I have no idea.
Again, it's hard to move past those kinds of themes when you're doing a military mecha, right? Like it's going to be part and parcel.
But you've seen both. Would you
Yes.
say that there are
parallels, for sure.
parallels for sure? It's
Yes.
not the same thing. I'm not implying that, but
But the way the characters experience war and how it's portrayed through their actions, like you can't help but have that kind of comparison as well. Again, we're not saying like 86 is Gundam, just like how we're not saying that 86 is Attack on Titan, but it is going to be like kind of short-sighted to say that there's no similarities whatsoever.
then you get kind of the Levi, Eren, Mikasa main character, the stoic guy, main character Shin.
Yep.
But actually is more than that as it kind of progresses on, right? I also think there is another scene that is so heartbreaking to me, even though it was kind of played very innocently, is towards the end of part 1, a bunch of characters went to a school and they started like role playing.
Yep.
Fucking lost my shit, dude. I think, and I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but I feel like if you are a war veteran and you watch 86, I don't know if that's the greatest idea. I have no basis for this. I just got an inkling that it might be a bit affecting.
Yeah.
It might help, but it might not
You
help.
also have to remember as well that a lot of these people that are fighting in this war, they're kids.
Yeah. And that's the other fucked up thing too. I mean, it's very like parts and parcel with, for example, AOT and IBO, right? All right, so I've said a lot, and I've said how good the production value is. So how do I feel about this show that I think is really good? I just don't think it's great. I don't really think that it is that good of a show.
I'm not cracking my knuckles
Because you're mad?
No, I mean I want to hear you out before I No, I'm joking now.
I don't know, because every time I watched it, it was a roller coaster because the first couple episodes was really slow. Then it picked back up significantly, and then it kind of dipped towards the end before the quote-unquote final battle of part 1. Then it kind of went up again, and then it kind of just poof. And I understand there's a part 2. I understand that very likely, like, but imagine the wait that you have to do at the end of part 1.
There's a reason why part 2 is higher rated massively.
Yeah,
compared
and
to
a
the
lot
first
of
part.
these scenarios, that's the case, right?
Yeah. I think with these kinds of series, and it's the same that I felt with IBO as well, the characterization takes time. It takes time for characters to really flesh out their personalities and how they're actually playing things out. And that's why, like, I feel like there were a lot of concerns with part 1 in terms of how slow it was.
But here's the thing about these war-torn, war-themed shows, right? Because it's like the Saving Private Ryan Band of Brothers or, AOT and IBO where, like, on one hand, war is horrendous. Of course, war never changes is that Fallout line. I understand that. I've seen enough. I've never been in a war, but I've seen enough to be convinced of that, right? But I guess a kind of mainstay in a lot of these shows is that they're expendable. At any point, the people that you share a drink with, you have a meal with, you have a very fond memory of, or you might even have feelings for each other, can be wiped out in an instant. AOT, the first couple episodes, is very indicative of that right off the bat, right? And I'm sure IBO has a lot of that. 86 has a lot of that as well. But at some point, if you don't have, and this is going to be a really bad term for me to use, but kind of like red shirts, that have no real personality, says a couple of lines or an archetype, and then boom, disappear. But what do you do about the people that you kind of keep as like your core, but then you kind of need new people, and that, you know what I mean? And then the people that stay become so developed that it's kind of hard to, axe them, so to speak, or it has to be a very pivotal moment, or sometimes used as sometimes as a fuck you moment.
I mean, that particular thing you're talking about exists in all the other shows too. Right?
Absolutely.
Like IBO, like AOT, and
it's like one of those.
But it's also just really honing in, like what you said too, in that these shows really focus on the fact that they're portraying the human life is expendable.
Yeah.
In the name of war.
Like Iron Fortress, Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress is kind of in the same vein too. It's like always like, oh, but these core characters probably won't die, but everyone else is kind of like fair game.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily to say that 86 is
I don't think
any
you're
different.
I don't think you're
But it's
talking
like-
about it like in terms of like this being an 86 problem. I think it's just something you feel about the genre in general.
And some people do it better than others, and I feel 86, at least the first part, didn't have time to really flesh out.
Oh, they fleshed it the fuck out for part 2.
Well, that's why I kind of, after watching like the first like 10 minutes of first episode of part 2.
And you know how this always goes, where it's like you gave your initial thoughts after watching part 1, and then part 2.
I mean,
it's
wasn't that the same with JoJo, right?
Yeah, every single time you watch JoJo, yeah.
No, but like, listen, like, I watched the first 10 minutes of part 2, episode 1, and I was just like, oh shit. Probably should not watch this anymore, because if I do, we're gonna have to record another day, Will. I have to binge this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, because part 2 is amazing.
But here's the other thing too. There is a general, right? One of the female main characters. She's a general that does the proxy war, right? I also feel like a lot of, on one hand, it's very understandable, like the social hierarchy, the racism. But on the other hand,
there's also some misogyny in there too, as well,
and some really fucked up shit, because just because you're the rebels, you're the good guys in for a majority of people, is even said by some of the good guys that like not all of us good guys are actually good guys, or some of us that are not here anymore, they were actually bad, and some of what we say are the bad guys, not all y'all bad.
Yeah.
All right.
What I would say in terms of like comparisons, I know you're comparing it to IBO as well as AOT, but
with AOT mainly because
I actually found a lot more comparison to another military mecha series, Code Geass, because a lot of the tropes that exist in 86 were very much founded in Code Geass.
Well, the thing
that I think it's just that different character developments play out.
Well, I think Code Geass, what I think of is more like Yagami, like more like what 5,
but the way that he
like
gets
4D
but the way he gets to that level,
for sure,
is what you fundamentally find in 86.
Plus, the spider things looks like the air maneuver gears in AOT. Okay, it's not exact. It's not the same. They're not cheating off of each other. If anything, it's more inspired by each other than anything. It's not stealing. I gave it an 8, part 1,
which is still like really damn good. Right, like let's not again. We've talked about
it's like a B plus.
We've talked about whether eights are the new mid compared to the 7s.
It's an 8.5 in my opinion. I just can't give it anything more, at least for part 1.
Yeah, you just haven't finished the next part yet. Then at that point, you might have a different idea of how the whole series plays out. It's the same way when you talk about Monogatari, right? You can't just give like a score for each specific one and then like add those together and then you get the
because it's
score.
kind of like hard with these split curse systems, because I also feel like the male main character's issues, like his main kind of goal in part 1, was kind of done well and too quick at the same time. I can't really go into it because that issue also is connected to the female main character that I also feel like is like kind of lazy in some ways, or very, very, very coincidental, which just so happens, by the way, to be somewhat related to the main female character's friend in some capacity, that I thought is just like, wow, that's the biggest coincidence fucking ever.
I mean, you have 2 very volatile main characters, one of which his name is legitimately Shine, which is die, right? So,
and him being the Reaper, I think, is very apt, but at the same time, it's like his special powers, shall we say, And I'm being
that part was a little bit like
I'm just
okay,
like, okay.
I guess this is happening now.
Because I thought your name, like your code name, is because you know you're the Reaper or the Undertaker because of this. I'm like, no, it's because of that. I'm just like, okay, guys, come on. Or when a special reveal happened to be given to the female main character at a very specific moment, or the hypocrisy of the government and what all I can say is it's an extremely good show, but at least with part 1, it doesn't do anything new that adds to the genre other than a very good entry in it, rather than being kind of like a legacy title. You know what I mean? Like Akira. It's not Akira level, but it's like an extremely good, military series. I love the duality. I love the different points. And it sounds like the way that they're going to go potentially is like 2 routes to solve the same issue. It sounds pretty cool, because where I think it will head is kind of like, yo, Will, I'll meet you on the other side of this mountain, and on the way I know you're going to have this goal in mind, and I have the same goal in mind, but you're going to conquer that way, I'm going to conquer this way, and we're going to meet on the other side of the world at this specific spot. I think that's kind of cool, but can you do that in like 13, 12 episodes? I have no idea. Also, with the characters that remain, because obviously a lot of them die, what can you do that is different? Again, there's a lot that can be changed, because I know, because all these split curse things can happen where it dramatically shifts the narrative. I just think 12 episodes is
11 episodes, right?
11 episodes is a very tall ask for a lot of people. Thank God the production value is like A+ S tier.
I mean, it may not be important, it may be important, but during the production of 86, especially in part 2, they were experiencing a couple of production issues. So, hence, like, some episodes were actually delayed when it came out. So I think, again, when it comes to adapting not just a light novel series, but a military mecha series,
and a good one and well known,
it's very hard to keep a steady ship, and you have to give props to A1 and all the people involved. That they managed to steady this ship. I agree with a lot of the things you say in terms of like this show, like especially like with part 1, that there were a lot of good points. It's just that it took time to get there. Sometimes the characterizations are a little bit too flippy floppy. Like sometimes you see like, oh, they're really, really cool here, and then all of a sudden it kind of like poof, just disappears. Certain characters who seem to be pivotal end up not being pivotal, and then the ones that like are, like you said, the red shirts, like there may be things that you felt were a little bit unnecessary or just unneeded. But
I think the main female character's quote unquote best friend, I have problems with her.
Yep.
Like big problems. Like I'm not talking like, oh, she is a good or bad person. I'm talking like she is not well written, or there are a lot of coincidences that I just can't buy. I can't buy into. When the rest of your writing is not outstanding, not like Shakespeare, but it's still really good.
Are you talking about Penrose, Henrietta? The friend of
the scientist.
Yeah, that's Henrose Henrietta.
I don't even remember her name.
I don't think she was a bad character, but I agree in that, like, yeah, they probably could have spent. Again, it's hard when you have such a huge cast of characters, right?
Well, yeah, but like 3/4 of them are gone by the end. But here's the other thing. Her rant, she does the scientist does a rant. I thought it was like extremely powerful, and I thought like how that gets resolved wasn't actually necessarily bad. The coincidence of it all makes it so glaring to me when everything else is either done well or done extremely well. So it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. But you still gave it an 8.
Yeah.
Which is a very good score.
And I think a lot of it is due to the production value.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, like when you watch these kinds of shows, especially with something that's done by A1, right? It's something that you should be noticing in the first place.
If someone were to come to me and be like, I want an action military show that is kind of, modern-esque, I would say 86 over AOT. Because just I think AOT is really like intense, and 86 is kind of not necessarily AOT's younger brother, but I think AOT is like, I need to fucking lie down after one episode, whereas 86 is like, I need to think about what just happened. That's kind of
86, in my opinion, is more focused on like emotional trauma, like
Absolutely.
dealing with issues that can't be solved just by firing a gun. Whereas with AOT, everything is fucked up,
yeah.
right? So it's like it's not fair to make that comparison, but whatever you see in 86, AOT's kind of done that already. But
And
then again, with AOT, there's probably series that preceded before that also have touched on those particular
And one of the
themes.
things, for example, I had huge criticisms of part one was it was extremely lopsided in terms of the quantity of characters on one side of the fence, shall we say. And then instantly in part two, first episode, that kind of resolves itself, but at what extent, I don't know. But immediately I was like, oh, okay. I see. So it's like you got help. So, okay, that's good. Because that was one of my huge criticisms. Like, the whole, like, slice of life aspect, I thought was extremely sad, actually.
Yeah.
And I think
mean,
it's very somber.
Not all slice of life is meant to be, like, happy-go-lucky, right? Especially when you're trying to put slice of life into this.
To be honest, the slice of life part was more traumatizing for me personally than the actual battles.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's meant to highlight that. It's the silence before the storm.
There's
right?
a fireworks scene that is just so sad to me.
Yep.
But the thing is, how it got to that point was actually extremely heartwarming. So that conflicting emotion from the viewer also is like really good.
Yeah. It's the duality you mentioned, right?
And that part is like no writing. And that's what I love about the direction of the series. They do the directing part and the storyboarding and the camera angles like fucking crazy good.
Yeah. We're getting close to the end of the episode, so do you have any like summary, any like surmising thoughts about 86?
I was ready to hate on 86 and kind of be a contrarian. I'm not like a firm devout believer, but I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. With Sankarea, it's more like a tragedy of sorts. I wanted to like it, but I couldn't. So
wait, you liked it. You wanted to love it, right?
yeah, correct. Yes. And I was ready to hate, but I ended up liking 86 quite a bit.
Yeah. For me, it was like I'm very middle of the road with both Akira and Kokoro Connect because both of them have their own acclaim in their own respects, right? Akira is obviously like one of the greatest movies of all time. It's not a top 10 for me.
But you see, that also makes it difficult because it's untouchable.
Yeah, I mean, I can't do anything but respect its impact it has in the anime industry. It's just that in terms of like, if I was to again do another Mount Rushmore or top 10 of anime movies, I don't know if I would be so like quick to put Akira in my top 10. And then with Kokoro Connect, it was good. It was a good series, a lot of flaws. But nonetheless, a fucking good time if you want to see what happens when people like experience some real emotional shit.
I think this cleanup is extremely crazy in my mind because we almost spent the same amount of time, even though we watched like half the quantity of shows, and I think that's kind of the sentiment.
It's good because like it's not so much just us wanting to streamline episodes and like have things done within an hour and a half to 2 hours. It also does allow for us to really flesh out like what each series does. Whereas like before we were covering 8 different things, it was kind of hard.
It's kind of like, oh, let's keep the ball rolling,
exactly, right?
But here it's kind of we take our time, we have discussion. I really like it.
It feels a lot more relaxed. Because now it's like if you want to talk about a specific character, you want to talk about a specific plot point, you want to just rant about something, you have the floor to do it.
It just so happens that these 4 shows we feel conflicted about, which then therefore means that there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Nonetheless, all these shows, all these movies are good. Some are great, some are fine. But nonetheless, I don't think that there's much of an issue in, at least from my side, recommending Kokoro Connect. I don't even need to recommend Akira because you would know if you want to watch it or not. And
Right.
you would probably already have watched it.
So now that we have cleaned up our discussion about our Anime Closet 6 cleanup, Will, how are we doing on time?
We're good. We're just reaching the 2-hour mark.
Okay. Do you want me to go into housekeeping, or do we skip what we're gonna do for cleanup 7?
Well, let's just go into the clean the show notes.
Right. No problem. But stay tuned at some point for our next cleanup because we have some interesting picks as well, especially now that we have loosened up our own rules for. I can't believe it took us this long to kind of loosen the chains a bit. But anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of Good Anime Palette Podcast. If you want to, we'd greatly appreciate you leaving a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps us out, with the algorithm and stuff, especially doing a proxy war with all these podcast charts. But if you don't really want to do that, all good. We thank you nonetheless. You can always contact us for whatever you want, good or bad. We always want to hear feedback from you guys through our email, gapalette@gmail.com. That's GAPALETTE, all lowercase, all one word. We're on Twitter. We are on a bunch of platforms. You can check it out in our show notes. But we definitely have a website. We encourage you to check it out, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. All right, music credits for this episode. Our intro music is Flow to It by Typa. Our break music is Laser Drops by Hip Color. And our outro music is 2011 by Rocket Jr. You can always support the music artists that we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or whichever way you listen to your music platform. No, you listen to your music using whatever platform of choice. Epidemic Sound does provide all our royalty-free music. And if you're interested, you can always sign up using the referral link in our show description. Terms and conditions apply. Woo!
That was a good episode. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. Not so much to say that the other closet cleanups weren't great.
Oh no, I know what you mean.
But I think it's the fact that now it's we're giving ourselves a lot more freedom to really flesh out what we want to say about the series we talk about.
It was extremely organic. I think that's how it felt to me.
It didn't ever feel like that. Whenever I said anything and you said something, it was let's just wrap things up or
I was worried about that. That's why I kept being a bit nervous.
We were good with time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh my God, how are we gonna do winter 2024 though?
that one's always going to be a tough one. I think seasonal episodes are always going to be rough, simply because we want to try and cover as much as we can. But look forward to that. That'll be coming out in a few months' time. So in
a month time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So
actually, not in a month time. It's the next episode.
Yes. In about 2 weeks' time.
We have it all planned out, guys. Don't worry. We just can't remember.
We just spent 2 hours talking about anime that came out yesteryear. We're going to be going into some new stuff.
We talked about nuclear detonation, World War III, child soldiers, loving zombies.
We talked about body switching and alien social phenomena and all that.
Cut us a break, guys.
Yeah. So, we're going to take a break in terms of, going into other recordings later on. But, thank you very much for listening to today's episode.
Thank you.
Yep. And, again, this is subject to change. If there are people who want to suggest series that...
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. We may have watched them. We may not like them. But doesn't matter. If you feel like you want something to be covered and we talk about it...
a topic or an anime, anything. We greatly appreciate any feedback because we just want to hear from you guys. Honestly, some of you have reached out. Awesome. Continue to do so.
Yeah. So, until next time, stay tuned. We will catch you guys on the next episode.
Peace out.